Hi, and welcome to this episode of CxO Disruptors. If this is the first time you're tuning in, this series is all about unpacking the agenda of the forward-looking business leader. We've been through some exceptionally tough times the last year to 18 months, and this series is dedicated to talking to the leaders that have been innovative, disruptive, and forward-thinking in taking these challenges on. We speak with noteworthy change makers, rule breakers, and risk takers to delve into the challenges and opportunities defining the business landscape. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Jake Lush McCrum, the CEO of the Rajasthan Royals, and the team's physiotherapist, Gloster. We'll talk about leading through a crisis, the principles and strategies that help their business to survive and thrive a year defined by a global pandemic. We'll tackle topics around data, people engagement, leadership lessons, and the COVID-19 strategy response. So let's get started. Jake, you're fairly new to the CEO role. Congrats. It's been just a couple of months. How are you adjusting?
Yeah, it's been an intense start with the season approaching and a busy summer. Lots of uncertainty still around sort of replacement players and various other challenges. So no, it's been exciting. I think, to be honest, there's been a bit of a sort of transition over the last year. So I've taken on quite a bit more of the responsibility during that period. And so it's not quite as significant a leap as it could have been otherwise. And massive thanks to our chairman, Ranjit, for sort of supporting that process. An amazing mentor for me to have through the last year or two and the various crises we've had to overcome.
How did COVID-19 impact your business?
Well, yeah, it's probably been a chunk more than a year now, hasn't it? I think I remember back in March 2020 when we were having an owners meeting for the IPL and talking about the spread of COVID. And we'd already seen it spreading in the UK, given our background with Blenheim Chalcott here and Manoj, our lead owner. And so we knew that the IPL wasn't going to be happening at that point. But other franchise owners were quite confident that it would only be a couple of weeks and we'd be going. So it was helpful for us because we could really plan for that scenario we knew was going to happen, which just reprioritized our thinking in that period. And then you go through a period of uncertainty for a few months. We got clarity we would shift the tournament to Dubai, which was fantastic. But again, my focus during that period was really on my staff safety to start with. I think in India, COVID was a very scary prospect. There was a hard lockdown as well. So the mental well-being of the team and players and management was all crucially important. So just how we connected with everyone in the group, how we created different opportunities to engage with each other away from work. So all of those factors were probably my priority for the first couple of months of COVID. And then once we got that clarity about the tournament, it was then all about execution, creating a safe and engaging environment to help the team perform as best as possible. So it's been a long 15 months, but we've learned a huge amount along the way. We've now had 1.5 tournaments in that period, and we certainly took all of the learnings from that first tournament into the second. And I'm sure we'll go into more detail on that later on. But yeah, it sort of went from mental well-being and motivation of team to then tournament execution, to then really building that vision out for the longer term.
How did you decide what to focus on, and how did you work with your team?
The focus was, how do we actually use this as an opportunity to look at different revenue streams, ways to optimize, other things more effectively, like our online education, the academies business was down a bit then, but like our digital content proposition. So what we actually did was we took a step back and said, okay, our main revenue streams, we are going to have to wait to engage with sponsors on the ticketing front, etc. How can we drive more controllable revenues that are actually going to scale more in the future? And so online education really scaled up during that period, but we also looked to support others. So we gave free courses to all previous IPL players, so they could then be learning and developing during that time, because there's so many cricketers who come out of the tournament and once they retire, the opportunities are quite slim. So we wanted to actually support and help them, which was brilliant. And we've had cricketers coming up to us all the way since, just saying that month I spent working through your course in lockdown, firstly, it gave me a distraction, it gave me something to mentally stimulate me and engage me. and it gave me a really fond association with you as a franchise. So I think those are a few of the ways we look to sort of use the opportunity to engage differently and use the sort of digital engagement side of the business to really step that up.
How did your role change in terms of your relationship with the players?
My initial focus with everybody was really around what we call the safety first approach, which was the immunity health side of things. And a big part of that is nutrition. Anybody who knows me knows that nutrition is a huge part of what we do and what I do. We also encouraged the players to explore alternative medical practices at that time, particularly around an emphasis on respiratory function, because COVID, as we know, is a respiratory disease. So I got them to embrace different breathing practices, yogic practices, Wim Hof breathing, all these other things that, I was hoping to open their eyes to a variety of new practices. So we began also revisiting this whole general health conversation for the players, but also their families and all of our support staff, everybody included across the globe that we have. And that started with nutrition. COVID, as you know, primarily targets those with poorer fitness parameters, particularly the obese and the diabetic. And a lot of the players had families who fell into those brackets. So the way I looked at it was, how can we, at the pointy end of this sort of elite sports pyramid, bring our best practices to serve everybody at this time? And using our players as the education vehicle for that to take place. Again, as sort of COVID progressed, we found that we really then had to go back to the physical maintenance side again, because we knew that at some point the tournament was going to happen by that stage. And cricket being a particularly physical game, as you know, we therefore had to become a lot smarter in our training approaches. So we looked more at what is the primary sort of importance in this format of the game, and that being speed. But speed is actually built first on stability and control. We decided to go back and work more on building these foundations because we now had time to do it. Normally in a season, we don't have time to go back to the basics and build foundations properly. So the risk of injury is always there. But with the new training programming design that we did, we had to do it according to the space and facilities available to each member of the team. So it became highly individualized. And it was about this point, and Jake alluded to this as well, is that we really started to look at the mental health side and focus on the mental health of our players and support staff. And I said, let's use this COVID lockdown opportunity to just learn and grow. And the way I describe it is, collecting tools in our mental health toolbox. So strategies, coping mechanisms that they can practice now, and then take these new skills, like I term them skills, back with you into competition. So then you're better prepared for sport and life, which therefore makes you more resilient, and therefore you're going to become a better sports person.
When you look back, what were the data feeds that you learned to rely on? And I know especially one of them was John. And so I'd be really interested to hear about your reflections on that data and what you did with it to the benefit of taking the business forward.
On the management side, again, for me, it's just knowing the key individuals within the organization who can just feed you back those key nuggets that can help you adjust things, et cetera, et cetera. So, having conversations with those people, having conversations with as many of your management team as possible, to be honest, to find out how they're feeling, what challenges they're facing, how you can support more. So I would try on a sort of monthly basis to have spoken to every single person within the team, on a one-on-one chat to get their feedback and inputs. Obviously, you're speaking to your managers more regularly, but speaking to everyone down to the interns, because their inputs are crucial. And they will be seeing things that I definitely won't be seeing, and how we can help the whole structure. And we did a year and a half ago and are still doing now is very simple, but it's just a Friday call for an hour where it's not work focused. I let two people lead it every week. So again, you're developing their presentation skills, their confidence, their organizational skills, and their creativity. They build up the session. They share it in advance with the whole group. They then lead it on the day. And that has been an amazing opportunity for us just to engage away from work, honestly, have a laugh. But from a management perspective, we did do lots of surveys and anonymous surveys so people could give that input just in case they were nervous about saying anything. So those anonymous surveys, both management and cricket, just sort of created that quantitative data that we needed as well.
Data's always been my best friend, or a sports physio's best friend, which of us never forget that there's a human being attached to the end of that data. And as important as that data is, you need to see beyond that to the person as well. And that's particularly so in the current sort of COVID context, with everything that's going on in everybody's lives outside of just the sporting world. So I use data to start, or as a vehicle to start a conversation and to build relationships with players. Because without that relationship with the individual player, then I don't really have anything in my world to offer. So I use the data to build the bridge between what I used to call, and how I described it, as the science and the sweat. And that's why it's so valuable to me. I also need it to answer the questions from the players. Why do we do what we do? Why are we training the way we train? And as well as that sort of communication bridge between myself and the coaching staff, I need to have them on the same page as me, particularly the performance staff and the coaching staff talking on the same language. Data allows me to do that. The data and the availability or the ability to track our players just allows me to help reduce those injury rates, reduce that fear, minimize time away from the game, and protect our assets. At the end of the day, these players are assets, enormously expensive assets, as Jake will tell you. So how do we maximize our return on our investment in these assets over that 6-week period, or extended period as it has been now, and to protect them? And protection for us doesn't mean wrapping them in cotton wool. Protection means to protect them from the rigors of the modern game by preparing them for those exertions. And I can only do that with accurate data, particularly the Catapult GPS data. I can't prepare a player for match day efforts properly if I don't know what those physical efforts actually are on match day in numbers. So it's critical for me. And then I can deliver that back to not just the support staff and coaches, but also to the senior management group as well.
How do you see inclusion playing out for you at the Royals, Jake?
The ability to integrate all those cultures together, the personalities together in that short time span is immense. It's immensely challenging, but we've learned a lot along the way. And you learn things, like basic things like engagement activities where you integrate them all in different groups and teams just to build those relationships with each other. What we did this year was we sent our content team to some of our Indian players, and we did some background stories around them, their families, how they'd grown up, the challenges they'd faced. And when you look at, I'm getting goosebumps a bit saying this, and when you watch these videos and you see the likes of Ben Stokes and Josh Butler and Chris Morris, and even some of the Indian players who have had different upbringings, watching, we had Kuldeep, who I think he couldn't afford shoes at one point, and so I had to borrow them off a teammate. You've got these guys who are bowling rather than batting because they can't afford a bat, and they've come through these challenging situations and sort of thrived under that pressure and got to this peak level in sport. It's honestly inspirational for all of us, and that's not an understatement. It really is, and it really brings the group together. So that's one thing we learned I really wanted to do this year so I've hired a videographer to enable us to go around to all the players to do this. He's literally flying around India right now. I'm doing it with 3 or 4 of our other players, but the power of that messaging and the unity it brought to the group was really important. We also do a huge amount of team barbecues. We do different games together. We've got people like our team manager and John and others who are really good at managing different cultures, and there are very different ways to approach different cultures in communication. So in terms of proactivity, we had Mustafizur Rahman this year from Bangladesh, who only speaks sort of Bengali, and so we actually had Sid Lahiri, our academy director from the UK, who speaks Bengali, and we positioned him next door to his room in the hotel, and we just said, Fizz, Sid is here for you anytime you want, for any support you need. And Fizz at the end of the season went, I've never had such a happy 2 months in the IPL. Sid was amazing. Everyone here was amazing. And I've never integrated so well with the group. And so when you see those small decisions but make such a big impact, and he performed amazingly well for us, and he continues to do so. it's really, really powerful. I could go into lots of different individual examples, but those are three sort of high level ones which we've sort of learned and implemented as we've gone.
And if I stand back, thanks so much for sharing that. If I stand back from that, you're saying that actually the way that you've created change is by taking personal situations into account and understanding every individual, and then coming up with ideas or innovative ways of tackling that particular situation, which I think again really resonates with all businesses, where understanding the cohorts and where there are similarities and differences, and then coming up with solutions for each. What are your leadership lessons from the crisis?
There was a few learnings, and a lot I sort of took from the first, like personally, I took from the first IPL and brought into the second, and that's, you know, there's, again, it's that personalization, but there's a sort of optimization of each of your management team, and the sort of trust you put in them will be repaid tenfold over. And actually taking a step back a bit as, you know, a senior leader in the organization and giving them that trust will allow, you know, a lot more, a lot higher performance, I found, from the rest of the group. I think for me during the last season, ability to remain calm was crucial. You know, we've got COVID cases going off all around us. You've got very challenging situations on sort of what you see on drives to training. You've got players in challenging situations with families who are ill, and otherwise you've got other franchises, you know, having so all of that's going on, and the ability in consistent communication with the group, being calm, was really important. I think the providing as much transparency and communication as possible was really important. Again, there's a balance. You don't want to scare them completely, but, you know, giving them enough and knowing all of our doors are always open was crucial. And that's something I pride myself on, that anyone can get in contact anytime, and I will find the time for them. And that's similarly with John and others in the group. And I think that people just knowing that's helpful. I think if I look at other people, I think what was brilliant for me is when we got to Delhi, we were in a challenging situation with hotel staff where our team had to end up doing a huge amount of sort of carrying food bags to different rooms and delivering it. And actually the leadership of that logistics group, who just said, Jake, we've got this problem. We're going to solve it. We're going to do it ourselves. And just, you know, they were there 24/7 basically in rotation, supporting, in addition to all the other work they do. I was just blown away, if I'm honest. And the players were, and the staff were, and, you know, we all tried to help wherever we could as part of it, but it was just an immense effort by all of them. And that, for me, that leadership, it doesn't matter where in the organization it is, that had such a big effect on everyone else in that challenging time. It brought the group together. And so, you know, what I tell my management team out there, who also were absolutely brilliant, they had to quarantine extra periods, they had to isolate, they came in, they were so energetic, positive, supportive. I just said, you don't understand how big an impact you had being the way you have been, being that united front, supporting them through anything, being flexible. And so it was a proud moment to see, whether it's logistics, management, coaches, just everyone sort of going to that new level, and then the effect it had on everyone else. And so the messaging there is, don't underestimate the work you're doing. People are always seeing it, and people, whether they say it or not, it's providing a lot of value to them.
Thanks very much for sharing that. It's been a super interesting discussion today. I wanted to say a big thank you to both John and Jake today again for sharing their perspectives on the last year and tackling the pandemic for the Rajasthan Royals. All that's left for me to say is good luck when you go back onto the pitch in probably a month or two time in Dubai. We'll be cheering you on. All the best for that. And for all of you that are listening in today, do stay tuned in to the next episode of CxO Disruptors, where we talk to change makers in the business landscape that have been tackling the biggest problems that have come up through COVID. Thanks very much for listening today, and see you next time.
Thanks, Sandeep.
Thanks so much.